Vallabha Gopijana Vallabha Giridhari Giridhari Gopijana Vallabha Giridhari Gopijana Giridhari Yasodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yasodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yamunatira Banachari Yamunatira Banachari Yamunatira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Vallabha Giridhari Jaya Yasodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yasodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Rama Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Bala, Hare Bala, Jai Gaura, Hare Bala, Hare Bala, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Paramantra Sri Bhakti Vranda Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Sri Radha Govardhana Ki Jai, Jai Gaura Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This morning Shastra Prabhu was supposed to give class. That's all right. And Krishna Kirtan rang me up last night, said he's up in Cairns for a few days, so you're stuck with me. Now we're reading today from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 10, text 37 to 40, and 37 is written, so we'll chant that 37. Prajapatin Manundevan Rishin Pitra Ganan Pritat Siddha Charana Gandharvan Vidyadhrasura Guyakan Prajapatin Manundevan Vishin Pitri Ganan Pritak Siddha Charana Gandharvan Vidyadrasura Guyakan Prajapatin Brahma and his sons like Daksha and others. Manun, the periodical heads like Vaivashvata Manu. Devan, like Indra, Chandra and Varuna. Rishin, like Bhrigu and Vashishta. Pitriganan, the inhabitants of the Pita planets. Pritak, separately. Siddha, the inhabitants of the Siddha planet. Charana, the inhabitants of the Charana planet. Gandharvan, the inhabitants of the Gandharva planets. Vidyadran, the inhabitants of the Vidyadhara planet. Asura, the atheists. Guyakan, the inhabitants of the Yaksha planet. I'll just read through the subsequent verses. Kinarapsaru saunagan sarpam kim purushandaran matiraksha pisachamscha preta bhuta vinayakan kusmandon madavetalan yatu danam graham napi kagan mrigan pasun vrikshan giran ripa sarispan Dvividascha tuvida yenye jalastala nabokasap kusala misra karmanam gatayastima. The translation is, O King, know from me that all living entities are created by the Supreme Lord according to their past deeds. This includes Brahma and his sons like Daksha, the periodical heads like Vaivashvata Manu, the demigods like Indra, Chandra and Varuna, the great sages like Bhrigu, Vyasa and Vashishta, and the inhabitants of the Pitri Loka, the Siddha Loka, the Charanas, the Gandharvas, Vidyadharas, Asuras, Yakshas, Kinaras and angels, the serpentines, the monkey-shaped Kimpurushas, the human beings, the inhabitants of Matri Loka, the demons, the Pisaches, the ghosts, the spirits, the lunatics, and evil spirits, the good and evil stars, the goblins, the animals in the forest, the birds, the household animals, the reptiles, the mountains, the moving and standing living entities, the living entities born from embryos, from eggs, from perspiration, from seeds, and all others, whether they be in the water, land, or sky, in happiness, in distress, or in mixed happiness and distress, all of them, according to their past deeds, are created by the Supreme Lord. Purport, the varieties of living entities are mentioned in this list, and with no exception, from the topmost planet down to the lowest planet of the universe, all of them, in different species of life, are created by the Almighty Father, Vishnu. Therefore, no one is independent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Bhagavad Gita 14.4, the Lord therefore claims all living entities as his offspring in the following verse: Sava Jonasa Konteya Murtaya Sabhavantiya Tasham Brahma Mahajoni Aham Bita Pita. The material nature is compared to the mother Although every living being is seen to come out of the mother's body, it is still a fact that the mother is not the ultimate cause of such a birth. The father is the ultimate cause of birth. Without the father's seed, no mother can give birth to a child. Therefore, the living beings in different varieties of forms and positions within the innumerable universes are all born of the seeds of the Almighty Father, the personality of Godhead, and only to the man with a poor fund of knowledge do they appear to be born of the material nature. Being under the material energy of the Supreme Lord, all living entities beginning from Brahma down to the insignificant ant are manifest in different bodies according to their past deeds. The material nature is one of the energies of the Lord, Bhagavad Gita 7.4. Material nature is inferior in comparison to the living entities, the superior nature. The superior nature and inferior nature of the Lord combine to manifest all universal affairs. Some of the living entities are relatively happy in better conditions of life, whereas others are in distressed conditions of life, but factually none of them are actually happy in material condition of life. No one can be happy in prison life, although one may be a first-class prisoner and another a third-class prisoner. An intelligent person should not try to be promoted from the third-class prison life to first-class prison life, but should try to be released from the prison altogether. One may be promoted to the first-class prisoner, but the same first-class prisoner is again degraded to a third-class prisoner in the next term. One should try to be free from prison life and go back home, back to Godhead. That is the real goal for all types of living entities. We're reading here about all the different forms of life and the different categories of forms of life, and they're very, very vast. Of course, this is a summary of the categories of the different forms of life from the great Lord Brahma, who has got a gigantic form, and he's got an ethereal form that cannot be seen by ordinary eyes. He travels around. He can travel around any way he likes, by mystic cities. Sometimes he travels on his swan carrier, and he goes from place to place. Now, I've read in one of the Puranas that the swan carrier, even the swan carrier of Lord Brahma, is so big that his foot can cover the whole earth. But when Brahma travels round, he adjusts accordingly. Lord Brahma can change his shape, his size, just according to the planet he is visiting. And so many of the upper planetary systems, the residents of the upper planetary systems, they can travel quite freely, and they have different shapes and sizes, and they can change their shape and size as they desire. They have all sorts of cities. Some are living just like here. It is mentioned noting the Kinaras. The Kinaras, I remember from my visits to many temples, especially in South India, you have depictions of Kinaras, also quite widely spread in the Buddhist countries also. You have depictions of sculptures of Kinaras. They're like half bird, half man, half human, both male and female, the human head and torso, and the rest of the body is like a bird. So depicted in Asian countries and also Indonesia. Many of the temples in Indonesia have these sculptures of Kinaras, half human and half bird. So there's a whole planet of Kinaras. Actually, they're described as having Garuda-like features. The Garuda is like that, sometimes exhibiting the human and bird form together. So Kinara, that's just one. Gandharvas are expert musicians, as are the Apsaras, dancers, and angels. They have got wings. There are planets with inhabitants who have wings, just like in the Bible there's a reference to angels. And so there are angels. So there are inhabitants of the higher, they're from the higher planetary systems, heavenly planets. Actually, Gandharvas and Kinnaras and all that are semi-demigods. They are between Bhuvaloka, Bhuva. So in between, really in between the earth and heaven, there is a semi-heaven, and many of these residents reside there. So the Kinnaras, the Kimpurushas are monkey-like shape living beings. The Siddhaloka, Vidyadharaloka, those who are very knowledgeable, developed in knowledge. Siddhaloka, now there are those that can fly, that have bodies of birds, half human and birds. They can fly everywhere very freely through space. And then, and as mentioned here, the Siddhaloka, they don't need wings. They can just, by their mystic powers, they can transfer from one place to another. Vidyadharas, as I said, are very highly developed in knowledge. And then you've got the great demigods like Indra and Chandra and Vayu, and they're squarely in the Svagaloka, the heavenly planets. They are the chiefs of the heavenly planets, and there are many other beings who live on those planetary systems. And then you've got Mahaloka and Janaloka, Mahaloka, Tapaloka, Satyaloka, where you have Bhrigu and Vashishta and the Kumaras. All these beings live on those planetary systems. So there's all beings all up. And then you go down to the human level, and then you've got the lower, then you've got serpentines, lower planetary systems, that there are beings with the serpentine type bodies, and quite often, and it's actually mentioned in some Puranas that there is visitations. Formerly in the other ages, demigods would come to earth, but it is said in the Kali Yuga, being so sinful an age, the demigods don't visit earth. It's too sinful a place. And so, but there are visitations from the semi-heavenly, from beings, the Bhutaloka, for example, the Bhutaloka planetary systems. Where there are Bhutas. Now there's all types of Bhutas or ghosts. Yakshas are a type of ghost. Pisichas, another type of ghost. Goblins, another type of ghost. There's Rakshasas. They're not exactly ghosts, but they're man-eaters. And there's good descriptions in the Shastras of Rakshasa, that's something, the pointy ears. I think that they're vampires. Is it modern terminology these days? They're vampires. And a lot of films I remember watching many years ago, the films of the vampires come flying through, and then they can be invisible and they change their shape, and all of a sudden they're there and they latch onto your neck or something like that and suck your blood out. So these ones, these Rakshasas, they not only suck your blood, they just eat you all. Man-eaters fly around. But they've got very hideous features. Although Ravana, who was a Rakshasa, is depicted as very handsome. Some of them are handsome. But generally the lady Rakshasas are depicted as kind of round bellies and round features and not very nice looking, and pointy ears and pointy kind of very harsh features, big teeth, pointy teeth. Kind of descriptions of vampires. Anyway, so all sorts of creatures are there. From the Buddha Pisichas, all different types of ghosts. Hobgoblins are kind of like very small dwarf-like. All these, you have the equivalent described in a modern sense or in biblical times, but they're also described in the Puranas and other Shastras. They are described hobgoblins, goblins, Pisicha Kechiris, that they fly through they can take a branch of a tree and fly on the branch, and this is the equivalent of what? The Kechiri. Putana was a Kechiri. Putana that came and changed her appearance. She was conquered over by Kamsa. Kamsa was very powerful. There's a whole story about Kamsa, how he was born, and he was very powerful, and he conquered over many of these asuras, and Putana was one of them. She became subjugated by Kamsa, and so he called for her when he wanted to find Krishna and kill Krishna. So she went there and she rode through on like you have the modern, the biblical description of witches, and or in other literatures of witches flying through on broomsticks or something like that. But there are such beings who are maybe not broomsticks, but they can use by mantra, they can use all sticks and they can travel in that way. Of course, a lot of people, they think that this is all mythology, but there's actually a description of these types of beings. So you get your upper planetary system beings and your middle planetary systems, goblin, evil spirits, and then you get the spirit type beings, and then you get the lower planetary system, serpentine, and other types of entities down there. And you've got beings like the Yamadutas. The Yamadutas are a certain type of karma. One is born as a Yamaduta, and they're very kind of hideous features also, but at least they are serving Yamaraj, who's a demigod. And the Pitris are residents of Pitriloka or Yamaloka, which is in the south, and they're a long way south. So all types of living entities are everywhere, all over the universe, and then it goes to other species of life, those born from embryos, those from eggs, those from seeds, so on and so forth. And whatever condition of life, whether they're born in the sea, whether they're born on land, or wherever, if they're happy or if they're distressed, all this comes about by the karma of the living entity. The combination of karma and of course what you do, there's a combination of karma, your actions and reactions, and what you deserve and what you're thinking of, especially at the time of your death. A combination of things, what you're thinking of at the time of the death, and what you deserve, and how you've acted, and will give you your future life. So, one is born as a Bhuta, one is born as a Rakshasa. This is the karma. The karma. I remember there's a nice story told by Lord Shiva to his wife Parvati about a person who was formerly a Brahmana. His name was Shankukam. He was a Brahmana, but he wasn't acting like a Brahmana, priestly type, who would be very expert in devotional activities or ritualistic activities, priestly activities for the good of humanity. He wasn't engaged in that at all. He actually became a businessman and forgot all about the priestly activities and devotional activities, and just was very absorbed and obsessed really with just making more and more money and amassing a lot of wealth, and he was just obsessed with that, and he was very successful, and he would, build himself a huge house. He had many houses, and he built this huge house. He had a lot of family members, sons and daughters, and he would invite big important people to his house. Even it's described that he would have kings come, and his house was so grand and huge and everything. He would have kings come to his house and dine with him there, and he would kind of boast about it and show it off and everything. People with riches and that like to show it off, so he would do like that, show it off. But he was very, very greedy, very, very greedy, and he was kind of a hard person, a very harsh person, but he was very miserly, very miserly. Even though he had a lot of money, he was very miserly. What was that in character in the Disney I always remember as a kid? Scrooge McDuck, right? Remember this character? Scrooge McDuck, right? Scrooge McDuck. I don't know if he's still around, Scrooge McDuck. This is when we were kids, many eons ago. Scrooge McDuck was a person who was very rich, and he would buy a lot of things for himself, but sometimes when it came to spending $5 over, he wouldn't do it. You know, that's a Scrooge. It's called a Scrooge type person. Spend like anything over here, but if it was something, $5 for something that was really neat, no, I'm not spending the $5. It's too much. What do you need it for anyway? Right. So that's a Scrooge type of a person, Scrooge McDuck. So he was like that. He was a Scrooge. And so much so that he even, you know, he didn't even trust his own family members, you know, his wife, and he had a few wives. And he had many family members, and he didn't even trust them. He actually, you know, he kept some of his wealth that they knew about, but then he buried a lot of it. This is quite common in India, actually, to bury wealth. I don't know these days, but in the olden days, they would bury their wealth. They didn't trust in putting it in a bank or anything. And I remember one devotee going out in Rajasthan. I won't mention his name, but he went out with a metal detector right throughout all the different areas where he heard there was, you know, people had buried their wealth and had died and forgotten, you know, it was all forgotten about. So he was out there, you know, trying to find some of it. So anyway, people get like that, you know. People, you see people on the beach with you go through, people lose a bit of change down there. You know, I got something. So he was that. So he was like that. So he kind of buried his wealth, and he didn't tell anyone about it, not even his family members, no one. And he would, you know, put it in a place. No, it was close to his home, but in a kind of an area no one would sort of, you know, gather where it was. So he buried it there, but then when he went travelling one time, with the family members, he went travelling, and they rested up for the night in some place. And when he was sleeping, a snake came and bit him. A poisonous snake came and bit him. And so he was dying from this snake bite. So they called in doctors, they called in mantra chanters, and all different types of people came and tried to save their father, but he died. He died, and in his next life, the karma. Why I tell this story? It's based on the karma, because by your previous actions, you can take birth in all sorts of ways. And he came back. Lord Shiva was telling this story. He came back as what's called a Preta Sarpa. A Preta Sarpa. He was a Bhuta. He was a type of Bhuta. Preta is a type of Bhuta, a ghost, but in the form of a snake. But he had a snake's body, but with his human-like head. And it was a type of birth he took. And so that's the birth he took. And so, but he somehow or other he remembered his former life. He remembered his former life, and he remembered about the wealth he'd buried. He had gold bars down there, jewelry down there, all sorts of things down there. And so he went there. He went there, and although he was a Bhuta, he couldn't do anything about it. He couldn't take it and enjoy it, but he was still so obsessed with it that he lived there as a Pretasabha and guarded it. You know, and anyone who came nearby, getting close to it, he would sort of come out and boo, and they would all run off. They live in a tree nearby that place. Bhutas like to live in trees. That's why when you go in the forest at night, I remember one time many years ago going up, we were in far north Queensland. When I was travelling around in the bus, we had a bus and travelling around doing programs, and we were going through this late at night. We were looking for a place to park the bus, and there's all this wooded forest area, and we were all walking through and everything like that. And all of a sudden we heard this big noise. And everyone looked around, couldn't see anything. Oh, the Buddhas are here. Let's get out of here. We're not staying here tonight. So Buddhas like to live in these places. They guard, and they're very possessive of that area. They don't like anyone coming in there. And they're, many of them are mischief makers. They enjoy causing suffering and distress to people. They like haunting them and things like that. When the people get scared, they take pleasure out of it. They laugh. Anyway, so he was living like that, and he would scare off people. And then, but after some time, he was getting tired of living as a preta sarpa, and so the family was still living in the house, and so he came in the dream of his sons. He had 2 sons, and he came in their dream. Bhutas like coming in the dreams, especially when you're just falling asleep, at that time, or you're just waking up. Buddhas like those times. And so he came in the dream, and he manifested himself in the dream, and he told the sons, one thing he never did, because he never practiced the activities of a Brahmana, he never did any Shraddha ceremony for his forefathers, if they're in a precarious situation, to help them with their position, or he never did any rituals like that. So he came in the dream, and he manifested himself, told the sons who he was, the father, and also revealed that I'm staying nearby here, and I buried some money here, but why haven't you helped me? I'm caught in this body. You never did any Shraddha ceremony, you never did any ritual. Why haven't you come and help? Why haven't you helped me? You should come and find me and do something for me. So then the sons woke up, and they told each other that they had this dream. But one of the sons was a bit skeptical of the whole thing. But the other son, his name was Shiva, and he kind of believed it. And then he went out looking for the place that the father had indicated in the dream. So he went out there, and he kind of knew the kind of location, but not the exact place. So he was looking around, and especially he was after the money, because he was really greedy as well. He was looking after, when the father told him about the money that was there, so he was looking around, but he couldn't find it. He dug a few places, found a big tree, and dug it, but couldn't find it. And so he became, at the end of the day, he became very exasperated. But then he found this snake hole. Found a snake hole. He thought, well, maybe he'd better put it down there, put the treasure down there. So then when he started digging, as soon as he dug, then Shankukam came out. And he's able to manifest in a form that he could see him. And he came out, he had the serpent's body and the head and his father, his face from before. So the son recognized him. And when Shankukam came, oh, what are you doing here? Why have you come here? Of course, he was just doing that. Oh, don't you recognize me? I'm your son Shiva. If you're my son, why didn't you do some Shraddha ceremony and help me? Look at the situation I'm in now, stuck in this body as a Buddha and in the shape of a serpent. I didn't think to do that. I was actually, I know you came here just for the money. You weren't even thinking to help me, and you're going to end up the same way as me, he said. You're going to end up the same way as me. Look what I've become, because I didn't do these ceremonies and didn't try to think of helping my forefathers. So Shiva was very, very sorry, very repentant, and said, what can I do? What can I do? And so, well, if you really want to help me, do the Shraddha ceremony. And especially when you do the Shraddha ceremony, bring one Brahmana here and look after him very nicely. Have him recite Bhagavad Gita. And look after him very nicely. Have him do the Shraddha ceremony, and then feed him nice, sumptuous prasadam. And with this money, and this money is here, nearby here, and when you get this, and then do something good for people. So the son did that, and then it is when he... he did that, and then the son became he had a transformation. He became very devotional and arranged everything. And when this was done and the Bhagavad Gita was recited, the father broke free from that body and actually attained a Vaikuntha form, and Vimana came and took him back home, back to Godhead. And for the rest of his life and the whole family's life, they became very devoted and gave a lot of food in charity, prasadam in charity, built temples, dug wells, did a lot of good for humanity and did a lot of devotional activities. Their whole life heard Bhagavad Gita regularly, and in the whole life, at the end of the life, Shiva especially and the rest of the family, also they went back home, back to Godhead. So that's a story that I remember, in that due to the karma, due to your previous activities, you can wind up in all sorts of forms. And so here it is mentioned about all the different types of, many wondrous types of forms, spread all over the universe. As I was saying in the class the other day, that it may appear that the material universe is its own cause, and somehow or other the species of life and all the different forms of life are come up due to just the material energy interacting in so many ways, and then life comes about like that. But it is not the ultimate cause, as I was saying. The ultimate cause is Krishna. And so here Prabhupada quotes this for Sava Jona Sekontaya Murtaya Sabhavantiya Tasham Brahma Mahajoni Aham Bija Pratapita. I am the seed-giving father of all the living entities. It is Krishna who impregnates this world. And Krishna knows all the species of life and travels with all the living entities through the different species of life. He is involved especially in his Purusha avatar form. First of all, as the Mahavishnu, the great gigantic form of Vishnu, who is just the universe that's come from his pores and his breathing. And then as Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, specifically Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is the seed-giving father to the living entities in this universe and all the universes. And then you have Chiradakshaya Vishnu, who goes within the heart and travels with all the living entities everywhere. So these Purusha avatars especially are related to the living entity in this world and all the different species of life. So a combination of the material energy and the living entity, the material energy, the spiritual energy, but both are connected to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So one has to try to understand this knowledge, become fixed in this knowledge, come to the point of transcendent knowledge, and in 7th chapter of Gita, Idam Jnanam Upasritam Mavasadamyam Agata Sagipina Pujayate Pralaya Na Vyatanti Cha. Krishna says, when you become fixed in this knowledge, this transcendent knowledge, you can attain a transcendental nature like my own, spiritual nature. And when you're established like that, you will not be born at the time of creation. You will not die or be disturbed at the time of dissolution. In the time of the Jayanti, the birth, you will not take another birth. You will not face another death. You will transcend all these different species of life, and you will be qualitatively one with and equal to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This Prabhupada explains in his book. Qualitatively, not quantitatively, but in other words, we will be established in our qualitative position, spiritual, will be the same as Krishna. So, this knowledge is very valuable, and we understand that all the varieties within this world are there, and in the spiritual world. When one becomes liberated, it's not that one loses their identity, their individuality. One retains the identity and individuality and goes to the variegatedness of the spiritual world. Just like there's variety in this world, just like people live for variety. To have one thing over and over, you might love something. I love apples. I just could eat apples but actually if you actually have to eat apples all the time, after a while you would hate apples. So, when it's just one thing, what makes life interesting in this world even is the variety. But of course that is frustrated because it is, even the variety is temporary and it's going over and over the same thing. But in the spiritual world, that variety is unlimited and ever expanding. So as we are liberated, we go to that variety, but of the spiritual world. And so we're in that variety of the spiritual world in our connection and our loving service to the Supreme Personality of God. And this is considered the perfection of existence. And many, many in the past, great sages in the past, have attained this supreme perfection by being situated in this best of all knowledge, in this transcendental position. So Hare Krishna, thank you very much for listening to class. I've finished there. Has anyone got any question or comment in regard to this verse today? Yes.
Thank you. I was wondering if any of these living entities, like for example the Rakshasas, if they're here as well.
The Rakshasas. The Rakshasas, oh yeah, they can be here. I mean, in the olden days, they were here all over the place, right? You know, you read in the Mahabharata, Bhima had to fight with Hidimbi, and so the Rakshasa, but they have the Rakshasa abode also, which is away from this world, the earth world. Or they can live here as well. So they can live there, or they can live here, just like the Bhutas. The Bhutas are here, but they also have a Bhuta Loka. They have an abode. So they have an abode that's a little bit removed from earth, where they live there and they have their king there. And this is described in the various shastras. But they can also live on the earthly planet. So are you asking me whether they are existing even today, as they're living in different planets? Interestingly enough, as I think I mentioned in the class, that it's mentioned that even in the Shastras, that even though in the Kali Yuga the demigods don't visit because it's such a sinful age, there are other beings who do visit from these types of planetary systems. The Bhutas come and go, and other like Rakshasa type entities, even some from the lower planetary systems are said to come up and visit. And you have these modern occurrences like UFOs and visitations from people from other worlds. These are mainly from the Antariksha level and the lower planetary system level. They actually visit, and they don't mind visiting, even in the Kali Yuga. Although the great demigods, they don't visit. So they visit, and Rakshasas can be present, and they can change their shape. They can change their form, so they can be amongst us, and we wouldn't even know, because their appearance is like us. So I know there's a lot of people who think these are just stories, and there's a lot of books written with this type of theme, or even movies made where there are people living amongst us who are but actually different, not really us, and so many things like that. But the descriptions are there in the Shastras, so what can be said about that? And they actually exist. Yes.
Why is it that some people, humans, can see these living entities in some time?
Oh, you mean like the UFOs and that sort of thing, or Bhutas? It may be some sort of karma also for them, that they, some people are more perceptible. They perceive these things more than others due to their karma. It may be generally, if you're talking about jinns and all sorts of hobgoblins and and you're able to perceive them, that wouldn't be very good karma for you. And also, these entities in their own right can manifest themselves. Some of them have the power to make themselves a bit visible if they want to some particular person. They can make themselves more visible. And others just have a natural ability to be able to perceive them. And that's the karma of that particular individual, that they can do that. Very good question, thank you. Any other final question? Okay, Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.